Not horseshoes. So.
Well.
There you go.
Is it 9 o'clock right now? And then somebody needs to change that clock. This is our second here. Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, everybody. We'd like to welcome you to our second series in our budget workshops for fiscal year 2017. Do want to recognize two absolutely handsome gentlemen in the back. Alex Alford, our clerk of court, and William Pennington, his finance director, are with us this morning, and we thank you for being here with us. This time, Melissa, I will turn it over to you.
Yes, ma'am. Good morning. Since we went through the...
Is your mic on? Because I can't hear you very well.
How about now?
No.
It's not on.
Do it again. Maybe get closer.
Can you hear me now?
No.
It's not.
I'm afraid you're...
Speak loudly.
What about the one at the podium?
Okay.
That blue light.
How about this one?
No.
Just talk. We probably can hear
Just,
it.
Okay.
just talk real loud.
I'll just
Miss
talk
Melissa.
loud. To go through the changes that the board did direct us to make at the last budget
Hang
workshop.
on. If those of you who cannot hear in the back, the man that does our microphones and all, he has illness in his family, he cannot be here. You may want to move to the Methodist pews up front so that you can hear better. Those are the Baptists in the back. If y'all will move up to because these microphones are not working and we don't have anybody to fix them at this.
They were.
We can talk loud.
Yeah.
We want to stand over there, and that way the top more towards the center.
Yeah.
Why don't you come right here?
Is yours working?
I don't know if Jen's the director.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3. 7.
If you don't mind, I'll just grab my laptop that way.
This one's working anyway.
How's this one? That better?
That's perfect.
Okay.
Can y'all hear better back there? Okay.
Just to run through the changes that the board had at the last workshop, we've got the South Walton Senior Center. We're adding $12,938 to the budget. That would match the contribution that's made to the Defuniak Springs Senior Center. We've got, for TDC code enforcement officers, increased those to get to a total of 10 TDC code officers. And also, we had to focus, direction to focus on the ATVs versus the trucks when we get vehicles for the new officers and also replacements for the existing officers. We have got $130,000 for Friends of the South Walton Turtles to the TDC budget. And also, we're going to remove that half of an FTE for an information specialist. TDC's reviewed that, and they do not need that position. And also, right now, we are showing no increase in the current millage rates for both the countywide and for North Walton mosquito control. We have been looking at options as far as COLAs and merit increases, and really we're continuing to do this. We did put funding in the budget for a 3% COLA. That gives us some flexibility. It does start us in the right direction as far as increases for employees, but in determining how those are structured, we are still working with Human Resources and with the County Administrator's Office to see the different options for how to structure increases for employees. Another topic that was discussed at the last workshop was the TIF funding. The current level of TIF funding is $3 million in the current year budget, and we had originally looked at $3 million in the next year's budget to keep that rolling. What we're really trying to do is get the projects started in one year with the permitting design, and then in the next year let those projects be completed. And then you would just keep that rolling. One year you'd have them permitted and have design work. The next year they'd be completed, and you just keep that going to keep the projects rolling. In looking at ways to increase the funding for those projects, one problem that we were running into was, especially with the public works budget, we are trying to replace old equipment. We had all those down years where the property tax revenues were down, and we postponed equipment purchases for several years. So we're trying to come back off of that. We had discussed the other day about, in the next year's budget, the bulk of the public works machinery and equipment budget is replacing 10-year-old graders. So we were trying to find a way to increase funding for these projects without setting back efforts to replace this old equipment and hamper road maintenance efforts. So one option that we have come up with, if the board would like to entertain it, would be to supplement that $3 million with $1 million out of its BP settlement funding that is currently in reserves. This would give $4 million in the next year for these projects, and there is sufficient funding in the BP settlement reserves to supplement the TIF funding.
And that would still give us money to buy the equipment we need, right?
Yes, ma'am. We could do that without having a negative impact on the rest of the overall budget.
Our goal was to do two things, was to make sure we didn't ask for an increase on ad valorem taxes, which we are not, and we would anticipate the board not wanting to increase those, and to not impact our reserve funds to the point where if we had a catastrophic event, we wouldn't feel comfortable that we had sufficient funds available to manage those situations. And we believe we've achieved both of those goals and objectives and addressed the issues that you brought before us at the workshop last week.
Does this also include, I know Commissioner Meadows brought up in our last meeting, the Friends of South Walton Sea Turtles. Did you include that in this budget?
Yes, ma'am.
Good, okay, all right.
Yeah, that's in the TDC. TDC comes from the TDC bed tax revenues.
Okay, and are we going to look at, and please don't miss it, the Turtle Watch people do a wonderful job, but they're also tasked with education. Well, if these people are going to start maybe taking over the educational component, do we need to do any shifting of funds there?
Yes, ma'am, I'd like to address that real quick. I was able to look at the contract since the meeting last Thursday, and it is not in their scope for them to provide education. So that is something that they have, though, been working with Friends of South Walton Turtle. So I have a meeting actually scheduled with them tomorrow morning, so I'll have more information that I can present back to you at a later date.
Okay, good.
Is this program going to come before the TDC board as well? Usually it comes before the board, and then the board usually recommends it to the
It can. We have the TDC meeting coming up in the beginning of August, so I can meet with them, do some preliminary research with them, and then present something to the TDC board.
And somebody did drop off a packet that, listed what they would be doing, so I'm very satisfied with,
Yep, I got that as well, and I took a look at it. Mm-hmm.
Looks like, yeah, and there again, starting early with children, I think is an excellent way to go.
Yep.
You know. Getting back to the, here we go, to the employees. I believe I asked it the last one that we increase the COLA from 3% to 5%. I know we're trying to look at merit. We've been looking at merit for I don't know how long. And I think we need to continue to do so, but is there any way we could increase the COLA from 3% to 5% this year? Our employees haven't had a significant increase, and last time I went to the grocery store and bought milk, I was astounded, and And I don't drink milk, so these families that have children that are having to buy milk and eggs and bread, I just would like to see it possible. 5%, is that?
She was going to bring us some information
Yeah.
on that, I think.
I believe that we would probably need to make a few corresponding cuts to get to that. If that's the direction the board would like to go, is structuring this as a 5% COLA, that's something that we can work towards between now and
Okay.
when we get back in September.
What kind of cuts are you talking about?
The difference between the 3% and the 5% is about $400,000, a little over $400,000. So overall, it would just be to look all the way through the budget and see what kind of funding we've got.
Okay.
I would certainly agree with her. And I would like to maybe move in the future to a merit, but I want to make sure that we use that program that Human Resources has showed us and that we have data to back up. You know, why we're not going to just give merits just because we like the person, but we need some documentation to justify why we're giving merit pay.
See, so I think that's going to take some education on our part and on the part of our directors and our supervisors, is to educate them on how a merit process works.
There's a process out there already called the
Yeah.
Hayes model, and a lot of people use that to determine. So I would suggest that we look at what's out there, so that, you know, maybe we use a very sophisticated model on that.
How you, H-A-Z?
I think it's Hayes. I think I'll find out. But
Okay.
yeah, I'm sorry, Bill. I know you were going to talk. Say something. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
I agree also if we could get to 5%, but not at the detriment of the budget and the other divisions that are out there. We've got a lot that needs to be done, a lot of things that need to be replaced. So, and I'm not advocating no millage increase by no means, but the 5% is probably okay. I just want to make sure we don't decimate the other divisions in the county to achieve that and cause us some additional concerns and issues over the next year as to how we get these certain projects or other things accomplished when we don't have the funds. I know we need to maybe be thinking long range as far as our infrastructure. And what I'm talking about, I ain't talking about for next year, but to be cognizant of it, that every district in this county has significant roadways that are dirt that not only cause a huge maintenance problem, it also creates runoffs that go into our wetlands, especially in my district with the Choctawhatchee River and numerous creeks and streams that dump into there that are that cross underneath dirt roads within the district. And we might want to think about how we can accelerate our road paving throughout the county, every district here. So we might want to start looking at that, Melissa, down the road as to what we could possibly do as far as enhancing it or getting some additional funding somewhere to try and address those road issues that we have throughout. I'm hoping the new, I think it's, what is it called, Jones? It's that group of guys that goes out there and cleans out the ditches and the pipes and all that.
Maintenance crew.
Well, it's
Maintenance crew.
dirt, ditch maintenance guys. I hope, that's good to call them. I hope that's going to be very beneficial, because if we can keep these culverts open, we can minimize the road washes out in different areas. So they've got a lot of work to do. There's a lot of crossings and, out there that are going to be, that can be impacted. And of course, it's very dry right now. However, it's going to start picking up, and then we're going to start seeing some of them issues. But, and back to your merit, I have no problem with merit, providing we have a good evaluation system that truly represents what that employee is doing out there And we've got to try and make sure that whatever we put in place is not going to be open with so much latitude in there that you can have a good old boy or a good friend or something to get a better evaluation over somebody else. Because there's only going to be a certain amount of monies available to pass along for that merit. So we've got to make sure that we're really identifying and rewarding those that's going the extra mile, doing the extra work. Thank you.
Well, I have a question. The BP money, the BP settlement, you said we'll take $1 million out and put it in the TIF. How much would be left in there?
1.6 million.
Well, if the difference between 3% and 5% COLA is 400,000, what if we took some of the TIF money and put it towards the needs of Public Works for the new machinery? Because God knows we need new machinery, and then took what we were going to get out of the general fund and used it. Am I making sense there? I'm sorry. My mind is
Sort of.
in direct correlation to
I'd like to also add too that you forget that somebody's salary, on top of that, you add 30% in benefits. And we're paying 100% Blue Cross Blue Shield Gold Cadillac insurance, which is worth, I can't tell you how much that's worth to somebody.
Oh, I can.
Plus, we absorbed the $500,000 increase in that insurance. So when you make $100,000, you have to add another $30,000 to it for benefits. So you're making $130,000. When you make $50,000, you add another $50,000. So we need to think about that as well, because I think there aren't too many places in this world now that will pay 100% Blue Cross Blue Shield Gold Cadillac insurance. And everybody knows that that's worth sometimes $1,000 a month to somebody. So the cost of living right now, I think, is below 1%. And so to give a 5% cost of living increase, I think, I would be in favor of, people under 50,000, people that are in the lower rung of the thing, giving some kind of bigger increase.
That's what we did last year.
But I just think that I think we need to do a salary review and see how our employees are compensated compared to what the norm is, and that would give us some data to go on. I mean, are there gaps? Are there deficiencies? But right now, I think 3% COLA is, plus the whole cost of your insurance, plus that $500,000 increase, is very beneficial to the employees.
That's what last year, didn't we do 3% for those that make under 50?
60.
Under
We split it
60.
60.
And then 2, and we could even use 50 this year.
Yes, ma'am.
Say 5 under 50 and then 3
Something like that.
over.
But I think
And that's fair. I mean, that's very fair and equitable.
And
Yeah.
that's something that the board really, we don't have to decide it today. We've
Yeah.
got a little bit in there, and if the board would like to, we can put together the different
Yeah.
alternatives and,
We need all the columns, the figures.
yes,
Yeah.
ma'am.
And also, too, if somebody works, we're on a 4-day work week. If somebody works 4 days a week and they decide to work the 5th day, they get paid overtime. Is that correct?
That or they get comp time.
Okay. So there is opportunities for overtime if you work more, and so.
In Public Works.
Melissa, I believe me and you had a discussion concerning what we've done the last 2 years, where it was 3% above 60 and 2% below that. And I think one of the reasons that we went to do that is that there was such a disparity from the upper end, from the lower.
There was a natural break in it,
Yes.
seemed like.
And so over the last couple of years, that gap has come down.
I don't see that same break, just looking
Okay.
at the salaries. I don't just see somewhere sticking out that says, okay, here's a nice gap. That's where a break should be.
So it's getting closer.
It seems to be.
Okay, and at some point in time, if we change our methodology, then it could be a leapfrog effect above that.
It
So,
could for a few, yes, sir.
yes, for a few. Okay.
Mr. Enfield, anything you'd like to say? I know the three women monopolized this conversation. We
I didn't know
apologize.
we were going to have a chance to do that. But anyhow, I mean, the first thing I'd like to do is recognize the hard work that administration and finance have done putting together this budget. So thank you very much. My issue last time was the idea of if we're going to do an increase, to take a look and see the feasibility of a merit pay increase in it. And I'm not fast instead that it's got to be, but I'd like them, at least when they come back in September, to have had the opportunity to say what the balances should be for COLA versus how much could be potentially for merit pay. Again, tied to a system that does a accurate and fair evaluation of people in order to come up with those things. And I don't know whether we'll have that in place for next year or not. However, I'd like to see us continually moving in that direction. And when we have the budget public hearings in September, to have you come back with information that'll support, again, a budget that has absolutely no increase in the property taxes in the rates for either North Walton mosquito control or the county-wide, and at the same time continues to support all of the basic needs we've got, and make sure that Public Works, which bore the brunt of the cuts when we had the economic recession, is being helped to catch back up to that point where they can start to service all of the districts even better through having good equipment that's not going to be subject to constant breakdowns. So again, my thank you for putting together this budget.
Yes, sir.
Yes, I've heard comments from other counties, and actually, we need to stop all mail going to Melissa, because I understand people are trying to steal her. So we cannot let that happen. So you can no longer get mail from out of the county. But yes, she and her staff have done an outstanding job. Okay.
I just want to kind of talk about TDC a little bit more. I like the direction we're going. On hiring these code officers, I don't know if they make such people, but more of ambassador kind of / code officer, so that we're educating people, and that will deter a lot of the issues we're having. And regional accesses, if we could, really key in on the regional accesses with these ambassadors, and then continued by land, and for parking and landscaping. I know we're going to be doing some landscaping that we can do out of the TDC fund. So I like the direction we're going. I really kind of like to see a comprehensive plan of what accesses we're going to do in the future. Do we have too many here? Do we, I know that's not part of the budget, but I just got an opportunity to mention that publicly.
Yes, ma'am. And we are working on that right now. And we're actually looking kind of broader, even beyond that. Just Mr. Davis, I'm sorry, not Mr. Mr. Jones and I are working on kind of a broad overview of kind of the entire beach operations and code enforcement, the ordinances, just kind of looking at everything. And we're kind of just starting that process right now. When the off season hits us this fall, we're really going to try to implement some new policies and procedures and just look at everything. I think everything needs to be looked at from a broad picture of how things work together.
Right. Well, you're taking us in a good direction, and appreciate that. So
But you don't think we have too many beach accesses, do you?
Absolutely not. I think we could use more.
Right. Yeah. And probably key places, spread them out. Don't have 2 or 3 here, and there's places we don't have any. So thank you.
I agree with that to a point. I think though sometimes with the land being limited as it is along our beach access points, that just depends on where we want beach access. So it's just something we need to evaluate, I think, as it comes along. But I definitely think we need a plan of, okay, this is where we have beach access, this is where we like it, but always, if an opportunity presents itself, it might be outside of that plan a little bit, and you just need to make some adjustments as you go along.
Right. Not one size fits all.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and it's always good to have multiple beach accesses because it disperses people out. My neighborhood has 5 or 6 right there, and it's wonderful because every street can filter down, and there's not. They're
not all flowing into one area.
Exactly.
Yeah, spread out.
Thank you.
Yeah, back to the budget. Thank you very much. I really like the direction we're taking. We have overgrowth, over people down there right now, so
Yes.
growing pains.
Board, any other comments from the board at this time? Is anyone in the audience that would like to speak to our budget? Yes, sir. If you would come forward, please state your name for the record and spell your last name, please.
Randy Powers, P-O-W-E-R-S. Madam Chair, Commissioners, a couple of things. Obviously, you're going in the right direction on the TIF. Thank you for that. I'd prefer the $10 million that it generates, but maybe this is a big jump, but you're definitely going in the right direction. You do vote on the resolution tomorrow to set the percentage, I think. That, again, we're going in the right direction, and I applaud you for that. The other thing is, all of y'all have talked about the compensation and classification. You haven't done a study since 2001. Long overdue. Throwing out 3% pay raises, and I understand.
I'm listening.
Okay. Pay raises, just blanket pay raises, probably went out of date 10 to 15 years ago in most governments. They are doing it now only because they're catching up for the recession. However, your discussions about classification compensation really needs to go into the performance appraisal instrument. You need to just start all over and just start with the classification compensation study in addition to looking at performance appraisal instrument and training your managers how to use that. Or else you're going to get into you're going to get in a lot of trouble if you don't. But merit pay, if I'm in public works and I'm out there working, my butt off, and then somebody's sitting back at the office with their feet propped up, you give out 3%, I'm going to be angry. And I may be looking at the next county. Okay, enough of that. The other point is, your Fair Labor Standards Act, your overtime threshold is going from 24,000 to about 47,000, as you know. You need to look at those employees that are within $500 of that 47,000 and give them over that threshold. I would like to know how much overtime pay you paid last year to non-law enforcement employees, and look at it, because that's going to impact your budget. That's probably a lot of your employees. I don't know the exact number. You would have to get, obviously, with HR to get your number, and it probably should be built in this budget. Again, thank you. I appreciate the right direction on the South Walton TIF. And if there's any extra money during the year, I wish you would amend it in to that fund. Thank you.
Mr. Hudson?
Good morning. First of all, my name is Robert Hudson, and I'm the Executive Director of the Walton County Taxpayers Association. I'd like to add my thanks to those made by Commissioner Enfield to the staff. I have reviewed Walton County budgets now for 14 years, and the last few years the budget process has been terrific from my standpoint. Everybody has a sacred cow. Everybody has one that they want to see done or whatever it happens to be. But when you look at the overall needs, you can't just look at the needs for South Walton. You have to look at the needs for countywide. That's your job. You don't represent just one area. But there are a couple of things that I'd like to ask. When you say, Melissa, that you're transferring $1 million out of reserves to the TIF, is that what you're really doing, or are you increasing the TIF to 40%, roughly, and then you're taking some of your reserves to put into your general fund?
We were looking at taking the BP, the piece of the reserves that's the BP settlement funds, and putting the BP settlement funds to the TIF projects.
Why? TIF is there. It's $10 million. All you have to do is transfer 40% or whatever it happens to be to get the $4 million that you're proposing. And I think one of the things that the commission should look at is memorializing what that transfer is, if you can. For example, you have the sheriff's budget, which is $1.9 0.32, whatever it happens to be, percentage of the ad valorem taxes on an annual basis, has been for the last few years. It would be great from a planning standpoint if you knew that you were going to transfer 40% or 38% or whatever it happens to be, which tells you what you have to do other things. So that would be a suggestion there. I just don't see why you're transferring into an account out of your reserves into a TIF fund when you can just simply transfer the TIF and then unallocate those reserves into your current needs. Just an accounting issue, I guess you could say. Let me say that there was talk about transferring or utilization of $130,000, Commissioner Meadows. I'm really struggling how. I have no problem with turtles. I think we need to protect them. I'm just trying to determine what legislative finding you have made or would have to make to say that you could spend tourist development dollars on an educational program for turtles. Who wants to answer?
Well, I think,
And I don't want to make that a big deal. I just do understand that you must make a legislative finding that is tourist-related and that it is promoting tourism and that it increases tourism in Walton County. It could. I also am aware that you can make a legislative finding about any way you choose to, but I think to just do it without that would be detrimental to what you have.
you mean to answer that question, or?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, from my perspective, a lot of the tourists that come down here have never seen a turtle unless they've seen a gopher crossing the road. They don't realize and understand the value of sea turtles. So when they see these nests, when they see these, then, I mean, we've already heard stories of them filling in the holes, of them, damaging the turtle nest and the small turtles. If we can, I do think if we can educate our tourists on how valuable, because these are a resource, just like the water is, or the sea oats, or whatever. These, to me, these are a treasure that certainly the tourists come, and once they see them and value them, then they're, I think their kids and them as well, value the turtles. So I think educating them of trying to be careful, using the proper light at night. A lot of times you use my children. When my grandchildren come from Iowa, I got the little things from the TDC that have the red and put them on the flashlights. They went nuts going down to the beach at night, trying to find their turtles with their red lights. So, I mean, I do think it has some value with the TDC. I think, because not only should we invite them down here to enjoy the beaches, but we should educate them to try to keep the beaches clean, to try to, leave no trace, and to protect the turtles and the sea mouses and everything else. I think that's part of the TDC's responsibility.
Commissioner
Beach
Commander,
mouse, yeah.
maybe I didn't make myself clear. I absolutely understand the value of education, particularly as it comes to conservation and natural resources. I work for an organization that tried to instill leave no trace in young men for 35 years. They didn't call it leave no trace. They just simply said, leave it better than you found it.
Right.
So I do understand. My point was, I don't think you have a legislative finding that you can do that at this point in time. Maybe you do. Maybe your county attorney can answer that. I don't want to belabor the issue.
And Commissioners, I would suspect there was a legislative finding that supports the current funding of Turtle Watch. We'll certainly take a look at that and determine if that is sufficient or needs to be expanded, but also think there may be some language in statute that would provide your ability to utilize those funds, but we'll make sure that the appropriate mechanism is in place. If you so
And talk
find
with Clay,
to fund those.
Clay, the TDC's attorney and our attorney, and kind of get that worked out.
Yeah, I just think it's worth looking at. Last thing I want to talk about was your compensation plan. I worked for 35 years under the Hayes Step Plan for compensation. Boy Scouts of America. Let me tell you that I spent, as a manager of 90 accountants, 25 to 30% of my time managing Hayes Step Plan. It's not just that you sit down and evaluate a person one time a year. You must give each and every individual goals and objectives with benchmarks that you can evaluate whether that person has improved, whether they've gone beyond, or whatever it happens to be. And I can tell you that that organization abandoned Hayes Step Plan at a point in time for the simple reason it was very easy to evaluate an accountant. It was very easy to evaluate an engineer that had the responsibility of plans for camps or whatever it happens to be. It was very difficult to give a custodial individual goals and objectives that were manageable and everything. So it is a system that works very effectively. Employees don't go to the end of the year, and that's what you don't want with a compensation plan, is for an employee to work all year long and then go to the end of the year and you say, well, you didn't do this or you didn't do that. You must manage that individual, and we did it on a quarterly basis, and so those things take a lot of time. I do think that...
Was it worth it? Was it worth it to, you think? Was it worth it to analyze these folks and get Kim along, and did it help the organization at all?
I was the person that led the charge against abandoning Hayes Step Plan for the simple reason that it became very evident to me that it was very beneficial with certain levels of employment, with certain classes of employees.
It doesn't have to be
That's
that
all I'm
particular
saying.
plan. It can be a number of plans. I'm sure there's a number of plans out there.
All of those plans for merit are based on some type of goals, objectives that that person has. And I agree with Randy. I think the continued use of just a 3% or 5% COLA is detrimental to what I would call your employees. I am not speaking against compensation plans that are merit-based. I believe in merit-based plans. I just think they're very difficult to implement. They're very difficult to make fair, equitable to everyone that's involved, particularly as it involves certain classifications of employees. I commend you for what you have. If you can find $4 million, so be it. If you want to transfer it out of the way you're doing it. But this process is long and hard for you. I built one for budgets for the Boy Scouts for numbers of years, and I understand the demands that are made on you as an individual to divide the baby in the bathwater at times. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. There's someone else.
Jackie Markel, M-A-R-K-E-L. I too want to thank you for putting this together. And I also thank you for adding another $1 million to the TIF. But this weekend I drove nearly from end to end on 30A, and the road is cracked almost, with the exception of the areas that have been repaired around the bridges and the area that was resurfaced. The road is cracked in many, many places. And, you know, since the South is the area that provides so much of the ad valorem revenue to this county, I just can't see how we can't get more money in that TIF. That's what it was set up for. I understand, Commissioner Chapman, that all areas of the county need this, but we are the golden goose that floats this county. And if we let the south end and a road like 30A continue to degrade before we start to repair it, resurface it, you know, it's going to cost us more money down the road. I just think that somehow, you know, 58%, which is what we got last year, would be, you know, $5.8 million. I think we need to be shooting for that kind of range, and I would appreciate your thoughts on that.
Thank
Before I recognize anybody else, I want to ask a question of Public Works and all. The money that we put in the TIF last year, have we used it all? Have we used it all on engineering? Buddy, Wilmer, anybody? And is there, you know, if we put $4 million in it right now, and we use all that $4 million in engineering, fixing the roads, is there not a way that, say, we get to July next year, okay, we've used all the money, that we cannot put more money in that? I mean, if the money's in the, can't we always supplement, put more money in it as needed? Okay, I mean, that's what
it can be changed.
Yeah, that's what you know.
And Wilmer would know he'd probably know the details off the top of his head better than I would, but we've got those projects that have already been approved by the board. Although the dollars have not been spent, the majority of them, I believe, have been allocated towards projects. Okay. So they're in the design phase and moving through.
So we've allocated, let's say, $3 million. I'm using a figure here.
And Charlie he's nearing completion of his chart that he's going to give the commissioners that's showing everything, get it laid out.
Okay.
And I don't know it off the top of my head. It's just too much.
But if we say get these, let's say we have 10 roads that we picked, or you know, and we get them fixed, can't we later on in the year put some more money in the TIF and start on more roads? I mean, does it have to be in the TIF fund from day one? I guess is what I'm asking. See, I don't understand.
From an accounting standpoint, and this goes a little bit to what Bob Hudson was talking about, the TIF goes to a particular account. You can augment that account with other funds should you decide, but the TIF is a specified percentage of the ad valorem taxes that are there. So once that's decided, that's fixed, it goes into an account. If you want to put other money in that account from other sources, you can enhance it that fashion. So in theory, if you ran out in July and you had something else you really needed to get to, there are ways you could enhance that from other sources.
Thank you, sir.
I have a question. Do we have plans to resurface 30A now? Is that in our plans?
We do. We got plans to do part of it. 393 down to where's it, buddy? Western Lake.
And how long is that going to take?
That's just a small project. Probably been a week or two we can do that.
Right. So with this additional $1 million, could that be, you know, looked at to see if more of 30A could be done? Because I totally agree that it needs to be done.
Yeah, we have plans now. As y'all know, there's a limited amount you can do out on 30A during the tourist season. So we do have plans in the off season after September to resurface about, I think in the TIF this year there was about 3 miles of resurfacing. We picked up a couple miles out of our public works budget a couple years ago over at Eastern Lake from there back to 395, I believe it was. So we have plans to add another couple of miles into it from the TIF budget that you are setting now. So after last year and this year's, you're going to be about halfway done with it, and then we'll have the stretch from Eastern Lake down to the very far east end, and you'll still have the stretch from 395 back to through Seaside there to tackle.
So our goal could be half of it this year, and then work towards another half next year. Absolutely. And I understand we have to do the drainage before we really should do the drainage issues before we resurface.
Yes, ma'am. There will be some drainage work, especially in the Seagrove area there.
Right. Okay. So technically, what you're saying is in 2 years, hopefully all of 30A will be resurfaced?
You're probably looking in the next, I don't know if you do it in 2 years, maybe 3. 3.
3? Okay. Okay.
Commissioners, I can assure you that as we move through this process and understanding there is a dedicated funding source for these projects, Public Works has done a very good job of laying out a plan to utilize available funds to get projects ready to roll into construction with the understanding that there would be construction funds available in subsequent years. And as Mr. Enfield and the chairman's pointed out, we certainly, if we come to a point where we think it's critical or there's availability to leverage additional dollars by making other funds available, we'll certainly bring that to you for your consideration. But I think the important thing to note is through this process, understanding there is a level of allocated funds on an annual basis that they can anticipate, then in the coming year begin planning and design and engineering and permitting those projects that we could fund out of construction out of subsequent year funding, and keep filling the funnel. So as the money comes through, we'll be able to finance those construction projects.
Thank you. Mr. Alford, is there anything you want to talk to us about?
One thing that we did not discuss the other day, I know you and William were out of town, were the 2 internal auditors that were requested. So those have not been added. I was going to let y'all come and discuss those.
The Alex Alford. ALFORD. The 2 internal audit positions that we requested are upon demonstrated workload that we have right now. Our audits are getting much more sophisticated and taking a lot longer to do than they ever have. We just can't get to audit all the things that we need to. We just cannot get to them. So that is our request.
Okay.
So, any questions?
And
we went
how many
from,
do you
we
have
went from
now?
1, we've doubled our audit staff 2 years ago.
Uh-huh.
We went from 1 to 2,
Okay.
and now we're going from 2 to 4.
Okay. Well, I think audits, we talk about transparency. And I think audits are an excellent way of keeping the public informed as to, you know, where the money's coming from, what we use it for, where it went, you know. I guess I'm in favor of his 2 auditors, but I don't know how we add that. I mean, y'all tell me what, I mean,
If we have a bake sale, I mean, I'm really desperate for them, no joke.
I'm sorry, Alex, I can't help you, babe. Yeah.
But they are part of my constitutional duty as your auditor,
Yes, sir.
and that is a.
Yeah.
What is the difference between internal auditors? No. What is the difference between internal auditors that work for us, they're employees, and hiring external auditors to do the work?
The external auditors that we have employed right now audit our financial statements.
Okay.
They're not going to do the nitty-gritty.
Internal.
Yeah, they're not going to go out and audit the landfill or Parks and Rec.
Okay.
I mean, they're just not going to do it. They're going to audit your financial statements.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Pennington, anything you would like to say? You're finance director for the clerk, right?
It's very critical for not only the clerk's office but for the county to have a strong internal audit staff so that we can stay ahead of the curve and find issues before they become big issues.
Big issues, yeah. All right, how do we handle this? What do we have to do?
Vote yes.
That's a simple solution. But
Could you look at, you know, plugging this in and then talking to us individually and, you know?
Yes, ma'am.
Because every time we add something, we have to cut somewhere else. So
Yes, ma'am, I can do that.
maybe a comprehensive plan of the salaries and what it's going to mean to our budget to look at auditors and, you know, anything else comes up today.
I will.
But from our budget, the total budget request for the 2, we did make cuts so that it wasn't the whole 2 salaries.
Okay. So you compromise.
We tried.
We're trying. We're trying.
Right, and the audits are good because they, they give recommendations of how we can be better and how we can improve our system, which that's what an audit should do. So thank you for that.
And totally off the subject, I need a CAFR.
Of what?
I need a CAFR.
They should have been going around.
I don't
You didn't
have
get
one.
yours? It probably went to your office.
They're great reading on the weekends.
Yes, they are. You want to go to sleep, start reading that.
And it's online.
Okay, I know, but I want one of my very
I know
own,
you
please.
I will deliver you one personally.
Thank you. Okay. Mr. Hudson, you wanted to say something?
For the record, my name is Bob Hudson. The Walton County taxpayers are the organization that first supported the addition of an internal auditor within Walton County. We support adding new people, and I will give you a perfect example of why. As Alex said, the time required to audit this organization has grown. For example, the 2014 audit was available in March. The 2015 audit was available last month, I believe, at the end of the month. So you added 3 months. That means 15 months. Another year has transpired since you had an audited understanding of where your dollars came from and where your dollars went. That makes your job of building a budget very, very difficult. I would love to see you add those 2 positions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Okay,
No.
thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Ms. Moore?
Hi, Lee Moore, M-O-O-R-E, representing Scenic Corridor Foundation. Is it all right if I hand a few things to you guys that I think will just help you visualize? And Jay, I have a copy for you too. Thank you. Spoken about this before, and as you know, the Scenic Corridor Foundation is focused on improving the medians along US 98 and 331 south of the Bay, the county designated scenic corridor, which is also an important critical throughway into South Walton and out of South Walton for that matter. Obviously, the condition currently of the medians is challenging at best, and in the growing seasons, which happen to be, or the growing season, which happens to be our peak tourist seasons in spring and summer, are when they look their worst. And so from a tourism standpoint, that is very challenging to deal with and has been for years. The Scenic Corridor Foundation, I'm going to go through this very quickly, but I'm providing this written to you because it's a little bit, it can get a little bit complicated. But the foundation obtained and let me say this too, everything I'm talking about today, dollars-wise, are high-level budget estimates. That's all we can do at this point until the county, decides if and when you want to get involved and pursue proposals on this. But we did obtain a high-level estimate from Valley Crest to take over the maintenance of the medians US 98 throughout Walton County and 331 south of the Bay at a much higher level of maintenance than they're receiving today. FDOT mows and does trash pickup and edging about 5 to 7 times a year. And the Scenic Corridor Foundation for years and years has pushed FDOT to do more. And they just cannot, they don't have the budget for it, is basically what we have gotten back consistently. So, but many local jurisdictions take over that function from FDOT. So the budget estimate that we got from them would be, as I said, a much higher level of maintenance than we're receiving today. And I'll say this estimate was done prior to the 331 landscaping installation project the FDOT is working on, so that was not considered here. Also, there are some areas that are privately maintained that were not included in this estimate. And then we also obtained a high-level estimate from FDOT because if a local jurisdiction, of course, takes over that maintenance, FDOT will supplement that funding to the local jurisdiction. So the estimate from Valley Crest came in at about $590,000 a year to do this much higher level of maintenance. The supplemental estimate came from FDOT at about $120,000 a year. Now, I've had a lot of conversations with each of you individually, or some conversations also with Jay Tusa, with the TDC. There is some interest from a TDC funding standpoint, at a minimum for the gateways into the destination, and we are unsure as to whether the legislative finding could be applied to all of US 98 or just the gateways for TDC funding to be used for this. And so I just, this is a hacker version of a possible scenario, is what the map graphics that you have in this packet are, of the TDC only doing certain gateways into the destination at the eastern and western end of 98, and then 331 south of the bay, and then the approaches on 98 coming from 331. And it got down to about roughly a half and half split. And you could expand what the TDC is doing from here if you're comfortable with it from a legislative finding standpoint or not. This was just an example to provide a scenario to look at. And so in that scenario, with a net cost, again high level, of about $470,000 per year, you're looking at around $250,000, $230,000 a year coming from a TDC budget and coming from other budget sources in the county or funding sources in the county to get this done. We just feel like this is critical. It's long overdue. The condition of those medians is horrible. I've had an experience. I live on the north side of 98 in Inlet Beach. At one point this spring, I had to pull into the median break so that I could see over the weeds in the median on US 98 to see the traffic coming from the other direction. The weeds were literally taller than the vehicles. And so it's not always like that, I understand, but it does get very bad, and it stays unattractive, again, for much, if not all, of the tourist season, just because FDOT does not have the budget to do it any more frequently than they do. So this is just, again, one example, and I've got the numbers here for you, but Scenic Corridor Foundation really encourages you, if there's any way at all possible, for the county and the TDC to work together. Jay and I are meeting this Thursday to talk about this more in detail, and I will go through this with him, and he's talking with Clay Atkinson as well about the legislative finding. But if some money does need to come from somewhere other than the TDC, we just really encourage you to find a way to do this. It's a little bit different from what we've been talking about as far as infrastructure projects, but it's really, really important. This is an extremely important thoroughfare throughout the destination, and to get anywhere, everybody has to go through this, tourists and permanent residents. And so I really think with the world-class destination that we are working to build here, that this is an important part of doing that. Thank you.
Thank you. And Jay, you are looking into seeing what we can do, right, from a TDC standpoint?
Yes, ma'am. I have, as Ms. Moore just said, I have a meeting with her later this week, and then I am trying to get in touch with Clay so I can talk to him about the legislative findings, just to see if we're able to move forward with that. But we can maybe look at some other alternatives if it's, county and TDC kind of partnership, depending on the area. So we're just looking at the options right now, and we'll be back, we kind of have more information to present it to the council. The commission.
If you would let each one of us individually know.
Absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Ms. Merkel.
Markel, M-A-R-K-E-L. If I could just make a follow-up comment on the discussion about the TIF. If the stormwater projects have got to be done before the road can be surfaced, we need a lot of money to do that. We've had roadways cave in, as you know, the shoulders are crumbling. And the plan of having Public Works looking a year out to the future projects, that's a great concept. But if they don't know how much money that they're going to have until the current budget year, that's kind of hard to do. You know, we've got the TIF allocation money that y'all passed, and, you know, last year it was 58%, and then this year the original amount was 28%. If there's no certainty in that amount, then how is Public Works going to be looking a year out to plan projects? And the thought that money can always be added, that's a lovely concept too, but I would like to see in the budget an amount certain so everybody knows what we're available to do.
Yeah, Jackie, one thing about the 58%, last year it was $3 million, but it was only $2 million of the increment, and it was only about 28% of the increment, I think, if I'm correct. And the other $1 million was transferred from an infrastructure fund that we had started accumulating. So it was $2 million last year in the TIF plus $1 million from this other infrastructure. So we didn't get 50% of the TIF last year. This year we're looking at $3 million TIF. So we're looking at what, 33%?
28 point something.
28%. We're still looking at under 30% of the TIF. So I just wanted to correct those numbers because
Gotcha.
Because it wasn't all TIF last year. It was $2 million plus $1 million, and then this year it looks like it's $3 million plus $1 million from somewhere else.
And I appreciate that correction for understanding.
Yeah.
But we still have a TIF with a lot of money in it, as Commissioner Infill said. Well, the money's there in that pot. If the money's there, I'd like to see it be used on these greatly needed stormwater and infrastructure problems that we have in South Walton. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Melissa, did you get the number of the grants that Walton County received last year?
Yes, ma'am.
Did we get that number? What was that number? Do you remember? Do you have that?
I did not run
It's $15,901,000, about approximately $16 million we get in grants. That's scope, scrap, CIGP, so approximately $16 million.
Okay, so $16 million is coming in from grants from the state of Florida, and a lot of that paves a lot of those roads that you're seeing paved in North Walton. So we just wanted to make that a point.
And fiscal year 15 was a little higher because we did have the money coming in for the July 13 and April 14 storms that.
Right. So there are millions of dollars coming in from other sources that are helping us address these infrastructure issues. So we just need to find out how to get it all done and how to manage it all. And I think Public Works is doing a great job with these new computer programs they have. And if anybody wants to know what's coming up, all they need to do is call Buddy and he'll tell them. It's a long list of projects. So thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing none, any more questions, commissioners?
Motion to adjourn.
We stand adjourned. Thank you.
So we vote tomorrow on to set it, or what do you do?
Just the percentage.
Just,
Okay.
yeah. But Melissa, if we have $10 million in the TIF fund and we spend it all this year, what happens if there's not any more ever coming out? I mean, can we spend it this year?
You mean in the
They keep saying we have $10 million.
possibility y'all set it at 100%. But see, you have most of the money that's going to the sheriff's office.
Yeah. You could always cut the sheriff's budget.
You don't have to. You keep hearing about it.
Yeah.
Is there any way we could take some of the TDC money and fund something in the sheriff tax because we get that extra?
William,
It has to funnel through the TDC council, but yes, if he's got a program in place, Mark said just how it needs to be worded and worked, but there is room in there. There is room to do this.
If I work it right. All right, Melissa, you stick that in there. It takes a village to take care of me. I can't even think about it.
There you go. You need anything else?
No, ma'am, I got it. I'm leaving this for tomorrow. I'm gonna let
So what I'm saying is,